Hi, let's take a look at how we can use the slider blueprint to create custom animated sliders. So here I have an empty page and we will add slider here. So first let's go to the interactions panel and activate interactions. So this copies the interactions JavaScript file to our project and adds it to the page. And now once we activate interactions, if we go to the library panel, we now have interactions tab here as a page library. And let's open this. And here we get the top menu and select sliders. And here are the sliders. So to add the slider, we just grab it in the library and we take it to our page. This will also copy any necessary CSS files and other resources required by the slider to our project. So first let's take a look at the features, what the slider can do. Let's change the view to medium so everything becomes a bit bigger, and here we can switch on the test clicks so that we can interact with the slider. And it has controls to move between the slides, and you probably noticed that the slider is infinite, so that means when we get to the last slide and we click next, we again see the first one, and then we can just keep clicking. It will go on forever. And down here we have pagination, so we can also use this to navigate between the slides and also to see which slide is currently active. And the slide also has the feature to autoplay to the next slide, but this is disabled during editing in Pinegrow. So, okay, we'll cover all of this more in detail. So first, let's take a look at how the slider is put together. So here we can see in the menu the slider. Let's uncollapse it. And first of all, on the top element, we have a bunch of interactions that implement like navigation and initializing the slider, like this one, clone slides for infinite. So here we are cloning the first slide and putting it at the end to implement the infinite scrolling effect. And then we have the autoplay, swipe left, swipe right support, and then these are the interactions that scroll the slide to next page, previous page, first, last, and so on. And inside this we have the slides container. That's an element that contains the slides and that is actually scrolled. It has the only interaction it has is a scroll scene with start and end spanning the whole scroll area. And then here we have snapping enabled. So if we move a bit, it snaps back to the child elements. And then we have also pagination. So we are paginating pages, not elements. And then these are the items that are paginated. And we also let the slider automatically create or remove pagination items so that they correspond with the number of slides in the slider. And then this is the animation that is played on the pagination item to make it like active. And then to make it inactive, to deactivate it, we just play the same animation in reverse. That's the minus sign. We also said that this is infinite scroll. And it doesn't have any animation, like this is empty. So it's just setting up the scroll scene with pagination and snapping. And then if we take a look at the actual slides, so here we have 1, 2, 3, 4 slides, and we can add as many as we want. And notice that these slides are animated also. So when the slide comes into view, it has a small animation that reveals its content. So let's take a look at how this is implemented. So the slide, each slide has interactions that implement showing the content, hiding the content, and then it has scroll scene that will start the animation, the scroll animation, when this element, when the slide comes into view, and it ends when the last piece of the slide reaches the beginning of the scroller view. So that's like the span of this animation. And then here we have the animation, and let's take a look. And you see what it does is, at the beginning, it starts playing hide content, and then when we land in the middle, it calls show content, and then again when things go out of view, it plays the hide content. So if we take a look at the first slide, so when we are on the first slide, you see the first slide, like beginning of it, its initial state is at 50%. This is the scroll scene of the first slide. It's on the 50%, and it will play show content. And then when we move out, let me hide the visual helpers so we can see. So we are moving, and then it almost, just a bit is visible. And then we will call the hide content so that the content is hidden, so that if we scroll back, the content will be revealed again. By using this setup, we separate the logic of calling, like show animation and hide animation, from the actual animation that reveals the content and hides the content. This makes the slide much easier to maintain and customize. And you might notice here, like some of these interactions are orange. And orange means that this interaction has a comment. So if we either hover over it, we can see the comment, or if we open the animation and then go here to information, we can also edit and read the comment. But basically what it means, the orange interactions are supposed to be customized. And everything else, you can just leave as it is, unless you want to modify like timing, for example, how long the scroll animation takes from one slide to the other, or add some kind of special things to this movement. But if not, and in most cases it's not needed, then we just customize these animations, like show content and hide content. And like these default settings are very simple. So it will just, change the opacity of the H2 element to display it. And then if we take a look at the hide content, it will just change the auto opacity of the H2 element to 0 to hide the element. And then the scroll scene will call these two depending on where the scroll is going. And then the slide also has applied to many, so these interactions are copied to all other slides in the slider. So you only need to change this definition, and all slides will inherit or use these interactions. Of course, you can also like create different animations for different slides. We'll take a look at this a bit later. So now we are just checking like the basic structure of the slider, and then we have controls, which has 3 items. So first is like the buttons previous and next. And if we take a look at previous, it has interaction that is triggered on click, and it just calls sliders, one of sliders go to animations, and it is using data scroll to attribute to decide which animation to call. So if we take a look at this of the code, we can see that data scroll to is previous. So this will call go to previous. It will call this interaction. And why do we use data attributes? So that we can then use apply to many, and we apply it to other controls on the page. So we don't have to set up here any interactions. We just copy this interaction, apply it to all the controls. And here we just change the data attribute, data scroll to equals next. So, if we would want to do like go to first slide or go to last slide, we would just create a control and set its data scroll to attribute to first or last. And then this would call go to first and go to last. So it's a very flexible approach. And again, you can customize the buttons as much as you want. All this design is really basic. These sliders, the blueprints, are not meant to be really designed examples. They are like blueprints, they are like starting points for further customization. Okay, and then pagination dots. So they are here. And at start, let's look at the slider without JavaScript enabled. So we just have just one pagination dot. And then the slider, the scroll scene of the slider will create as many pagination dots as needed. So you just make one and everything else is done for you. And then pagination dot has 2 interactions. One is scroll to slide on click. So when we click here, it will scroll to page. And that means, it will use the index of the element in its parent, and then it will scroll to that page in the slider. This points to the slides container, and it will scroll to page, if we click here, page 0, page 1, page 2, page 3. And then the current is the animation that that indicates that this pagination item is active. So here we simply make it bigger. We scale it up to 1.5. And then deactivate, if you remember, it will call minus current, which means play current back to the start. So it will go from big back to small. Now we change, you see, and we go here. So the first is active, we went here, deactivate, goes back. So that's a simple approach to make these animated dots or dashes, whatever you want. And the slider comes with a group of properties that make it easier to use. And this is not a part of interactions as such, but is implemented by our blueprints library. So if we select the slider and go to Properties, we can now notice like a bunch of slider options. So the first one is direction. Now it is horizontal, and we can easily change it to vertical. And this also causes the pagination controls and forward-backward controls to rearrange kind of to vertical layout. And sometimes if we do this change, like now notice we have 5 pagination items instead of 4. So sometimes it's also required to refresh the page view to get everything in order. And then everything works, but in vertical direction. We also have this option, how many slides per page do we want to show? So we are not limited to one element, one slide per page. We can have, for example, more. Like here, let's go back to horizontal, it's easier to see. And let's go to large page. So you see here we have 4. Oh yeah, okay, you see what happened? So here we only have 4 slides, so we only have 1 page, but still the slider is infinite. And then this setting is responsive because it doesn't really make sense, if I now decrease the page view to medium, it should not really be useful to show 4 slides anymore. So now it goes down, so it shows only 2 slides. So if we now scroll, you see, and then if we go even further down, like to extra small, we'll just get 1 slide per page. But in most cases, I guess we would just have 1 slide per page. And let's go up, show a bit more. And another setting is what to do with scroll bar. And you might notice now it is on, and this is the auto setting, and it means show on touch devices, where it's kind of required in order to support the gesture scrolling, but the scroll bar is not really visible there. I think only when you scroll. And it is shown during the editing in Pinegrow. And the other 2 options are simply to switch it off or to show it always. The auto is useful because it really makes sense to show the scroll bar during editing, because then it's easier to navigate between the slides, when we work on their content and when we edit the slides. It's quite helpful to have this navigation. So, okay, how to customize the slider? The first thing you would want to do probably is change the content. And now we just have like H2 element is displayed. And if we take a look at the styles, we are using like flex to center the content. But of course, that's just an example. There's no need to really do it like this. For example, let's add, like this is Bootstrap page, but the slider itself is plain HTML, so we can use it with any framework we want. And let's put like some kind of Bootstrap content in the slide content. So instead of H2, I think we could place a container, like a fluid container. And let's make it fluid. And then place row in the container and place column in the row. And now show the display helpers. And let's get rid of the H2. And we can use like the column controls to set it up perfectly. Like this. And if we don't want it to be in the center, we could just change the override the display, like the flex settings in the slider CSS. And you see this style sheet is locked. And the reason is that you don't want to change anything in this style sheet directly, because this is overridden. When you will drag another slider to your project, this style sheet will again be like copied from the library. So never change the slides here directly, but instead override them in your own custom style sheets. So for example, let's align this to the top. So we need to override some of these flex properties. We can just play around, discover the ones. Okay, justify content. And we can also add some padding on the top. And now let's save this as a style in our local style sheet. And we can either define our own class or just override this class. Okay, but you see what happened? Our new rule is down here. It's less strong than this. So this can happen, but the reason is simple. It's just the ordering of the style sheets. So you see our like style CSS is here, and then the slider CSS is down here. So we just need to reorder to change, to put things in place. And let's open this. So we can change H3 to H2. And then we can modify the show content and hide content. So here, now this simply displays the H2, but let's edit it and let's say, okay, show not only H2, but also paragraph. And we can stagger the animation so that there's like a small gap, small delay, maybe half-second delay between showing the H2 and paragraph. So let's see what will happen. Okay, nothing. So why? Who knows why? You know, like these two elements are shown by default from the start, so of course they can't be revealed. So we need to use hide at start actions to hide the both elements. And then, you see? They are revealed like one by one by stagger. Stagger is perfect, you know, when you have a bunch of elements, so you kind of don't feel like animating them individually. You know, just set the selector that covers all of them, and then use stagger to stagger the animation one by one element by one element. And we also need to change the hide content, because now we added the P element, so we need to add it. And here we don't need to use stagger, we just want to hide them both at once. Okay, so let's see. And go back. Nice. So let's say that now we want to use like the same layout, have a bootstrap column on each slide. So instead of going through each slide, doing them, you know, one by one, we can simply delete the the other slides. And then we duplicate the first slide, Command D. Here it is. And then we don't have to actually have any interactions on it, because this one is defining the interactions and we are using apply to all slides. So we can just go ahead and delete these interactions, and then we can duplicate this slide as well. So we again have 4 slides, but they all have this new modified layout. And let's reload. And go back. Perfect. So now, you probably noticed that the content is revealed every time we change the slide. So what if we want to reveal the content just one time and then have it in place? So it's an easy change we have to do. So what we do is show content is good, yeah? It will reveal our content. And then hide content, we never want to hide the content. So what we can do, we can simply disable this interaction. And now the content is shown, but it's never hidden. You see? So another thing, perhaps because with this approach, the show content animation is still called. So you can see here, like the show content, if we open it and then we go back to the slide 1, the animation is called. So we might have some kind of, now we are going from the current state. So it tries to display the element that is already displayed, so nothing happens. But if we would have here like a set or something that would, hide the element and then display it, then we would get this replay every time the element is revealed. So what we can do here in the scroll scene, we can say, okay, show content. So then here we say add property, and we go to interactions, because here we have the options to play and pause other animations. And here we can say play pause only once. So now the reveal animation, the show content, will only be called once. So this is probably what you want. But perhaps you notice, like on the last slide, on the first slide it got played again, but the reason is that the first slide, it's infinite scroll, so the first slide is copied at the end and the animation will still be played there. So most likely, if you want to have this, approach that the content is just revealed once, then you cannot really use cloning the first element. So you have to clone the element by hand, in HTML code, and not have any, interactions there. Otherwise, it will be revealed as a 5th slide, and the animation will be played twice on the first slide. That's how it will appear. So if you want to do that, then you cannot just clone the first element, but you have to duplicate it in HTML code and just have it there without any interactions, with shown content, and then it will look okay. Another point might be, how can we, now we have the same reveal animation on all slides. So how can we change that? For example, how can we do reveal animation on the second slide, different. How can we make it different from this show content animation? And the answer is it's very simple. So we just add interaction. So that's from before. And we just need to override the show content interaction. So the trigger is no event. We just want to define it. Here, advanced options, we restart on play. That's usually, sometimes it's a bit hard to figure out, do we need this option or not? So we can just try disable it and see what happens. And in most cases, it works okay. But here in this template, we have it on. And if it doesn't make problems, no need to change it. So that's the general approach. Okay, so let's just edit this animation. And let's say we want to do something different. We want to, let's say, first move the elements up 100 pixels, and let's have this as set. And then here we will also bring down the elements so they will like kind of fall down, and at the same time get visible. So we just have to override the changed part, and the other things that will stay the same we leave as they are. So now let's reload, and we go to the second slide. You see, and here we have our custom animation. Because the way how apply to many works is for example, here we have show content and hide content, but if the interaction with the same name is already defined on the element, it will leave it in place. So it will only add interactions that are not already on the element. And this gives us a very efficient mechanism for overriding kind of general animations. So we can create general interactions that cover like the basic, most of the elements, and then on those special elements, we just define, the part that is different from the general definition. And let's take a look at the autoplay next. At the moment here it's disabled in Pinegrow. Why? If we use it, it gets hard to edit the slider because it keeps escaping from us. So usually it makes sense to disable this in Pinegrow. And here we can see how it works. So it's just an animation. It takes 6 seconds, and we can change this, just make it shorter. And when it reaches 6 seconds, it calls go to next on the slider. And in the meantime, it is updating the progress bar, the line on top, and then move the slider. But notice that, if we interact with the slider, the animation stops. If we go out, it comes back. And this is implemented with this user active, and this happens on mouse enter or touch start. So what it does is pauses the autoplay animation and hides the progress bar. And then user inactive on mouse leave. So when we go out, it starts playing the autoplay again, and it shows the scroll bar, the progress bar again. So if we want to disable this behavior, autoplay behavior, we can simply go here and disable this interaction. If we reload, course, we also need to then disable this user active, because we don't want the progress bar to be shown, and user inactive. So we just disable these 3 animations. And we can hide the progress bar. Just say hide at start and we will never show it. So that's how to disable it. And bring it back if we want. And the repeat on the autoplay interaction is -1. This means like loop forever. So it will just go on and on and on. But as said, by default, like disable in Pinegrow is on, and this is a useful tool to disable interactions while we are editing them in Pinegrow. So okay, this was a quick introduction to the slider blueprint. So we covered how it is put together, and then also how you can customize it, how you can style it, how you can change different like reveal content animations and change the parameters of the slider. So I hope this was useful and that it will help you to create many cool sliders.